ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tech Showdown. My name is Kevin, this is my co-host Teddy, and today we're going to be doing the Gigabyte G1 Gaming RX470 Showdown against this Asus Strix RX480. So it's going to be a 480 versus 470 comparison. So this should be quite interesting because a lot of people want to know the difference between these cards when they're going out and wanting to buy a value for money graphics card, and which one is actually the better value, with the 480 coming in at a higher price but obviously with higher specs, so you would assume higher performance, and the 470 coming in with a bit more of a lower price, but people will be wondering, is there really that much difference between them to warrant the extra money over the 470, or is the 470 good enough by itself? So let's jump right in then with the GPUs. So both of these graphics cards have the 14 nanometer Polaris 10 GPU. However, the RX 480 has 470 I should say, has 2048 stream processors, where the 480 has 2304, so a bit more. The 470 comes with 32 compute units, where the 480 has 36. The boost speed is also reduced on the 470, so this G1 Gaming went up to 1230 megahertz, whereas the Asus Strix 480 went up to 1330. So that's actually a decent jump up there, a full 100 megahertz higher on the 480. TDP wise, the 470 is coming with a 120 watt TDP, the 480 with a 150 watt TDP. And memory wise, this is where we see the biggest difference. So the G1 Gaming 470 I was testing came with 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory at 6600 megahertz on a 256-bit bus, whereas the Strix 480 is coming with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory at 8000 megahertz on a 256-bit bus also. So the main difference there not only is the memory capacity, but the memory speed. That's going to affect performance quite a bit there, quite a bit faster on the 480, which is at 8000 megahertz, which I think is about the limit as far as GDDR5 speeds go. So that's also quite interesting. Now let's briefly talk about the coolers. If you want to know more about the features of the graphic cards and the coolers in more detail, I suggest you go back and watch the unboxing and overview videos for these two graphics cards. But simply, the Asus Strix here, triple fan design. This is absolutely humongous graphics card. It's got a nice RGB lighting on the sides, and on the back there you see it's got a nice backplate also. So this is quite good, comes with quite a few features, upgraded components, all of that nice stuff. The Gigabyte G1 Gaming comes with what I call the 2X Windforce coolers, because it's got the two fans here, 19mm fans. This also has some lighting on the side there. Both of them feature fan stop technology, where the fans will only turn on once they start getting hot. Has a nice backplate there also. The Gigabyte also has upgraded components too. That means both these cards should be good when it comes to overclocking. So without further ado, let's jump into the benchmarks then. So these are the benchmarks I've been wanting to do for a while. We've had a few issues here and there, but this is basically what I want to keep doing consistently moving forward, which is 2 synthetic benchmarks. Then we have 2 DirectX 11 benchmarks, and then 2 DirectX 12 benchmarks. And I see this as being the most fair. Both of the synthetics are also in DirectX 11, by the way. But you see, DirectX 11 synthetic, DirectX 11 in games, and then 2 DirectX 12 games. And I think that gives you the most fair spread possible when it comes to comparing these graphics cards. So let's jump right in and see how they do. So it's quite interesting there. We're seeing that the 480 does pull ahead, which, you know, it should. But we're seeing about, on average, it's about a 10 FPS bump up from the 470 to the 480. Then when we go to 1440p, it lessens off a bit, and then 4K even less, which is, you know, to be expected. But yeah, quite a bit of a drop down there. So yeah, most of you guys will be playing at 1080p, and most people buying these graphics cards especially will be playing at 1080p. So that's the main one you should be looking at. And it basically shows, yeah, that you're going to get on average about a 10 FPS bump up on the 480 over the 470. However, benchmarks and performance aren't everything. So what about the temperatures? Did these chips get hot, and how did these coolers do? So this one was quite interesting. Also, you obviously can see that the Strix cooler on the 480 is humongous when compared to the 2X Windforce cooler on that 470. The results might sort of, yeah, they were quite interesting. I'll put it that way. So for this, I did my Unigine Valley benchmark on the Extreme HD preset. The G1 Gaming RX470 went up to 79 degrees Celsius, and that was at 41% fan speed. The Strix RX480, on the other hand, went to 66 degrees Celsius, so vastly less, and at 50% fan speed, so a bit of a higher fan speed there. So that's quite interesting. Obviously, you can see this Strix cooler doing an amazing job, especially when you compare it to the little G1 gaming cooler here. But that's to be expected, just looking at the size of these graphics cards. Obviously, with the TDP difference, you would expect the 480 to also be running hotter. So quite impressive there that the Strix cools a lot better. And yeah, it's just all that needs to be said. The Strix wins big time when it comes to temperatures. Now let's talk about noise, and this is where it gets even more interesting. So I tested both these cards for a while, and at low temperatures, you know, when you're just doing casual stuff, browsing the web, all that sort of thing, they're both completely quiet, so that's fine. The one thing I did notice though is when you start gaming, this Strix, even though those fan speeds were somewhat similar, the Strix is vastly louder than the G1 Gaming. So I suppose it just depends on what you really want out of the cooler, because the Strix cooler performed way better, but it was just out of the box, stock fan curves and that was decently louder than the G1 Gaming 470. So that's just something you're going to need to keep in mind. Of course, you can probably play around with the fan speeds and that, but even at the same fan speed, the G1 Gaming is quite a bit quieter than the Strix. However, like always, I'll let you guys judge for yourself. So this was done once again in the Unigine Valley benchmark, and the exact same time in the benchmark. We'll do the G1 Gaming 470 first, and then we'll do the Strix 480 afterwards. So yeah, that gives you an idea there of the noise difference between them. Personally, after using both of them, they're both decently quiet, but the G1 Gaming wins for sure in terms of just out of the box noise. It's very good, very quiet. All my gaming, you'll barely hear it. Whereas the Strix, on the other hand, you will definitely hear this when it's in your system. It does make a little bit of a racket. Nothing bad, nothing compared to a reference, you know, like 290 or something like that. It's no hairdryer, but you certainly will notice the fan noise on the Strix, but albeit you do get very good cooling performance out of the Strix graphics card. Which brings us now to the conclusion, and who do I think wins this showdown? So we have to bring price into the equation. So over on Playtech, right now, this G1 Gaming RX470 is going for 449 New Zealand dollars. The Asus Strix RX480 over at Playtech is going for 599 New Zealand dollars. So that's a $150 price difference, which is quite considerable actually. And when we bring in the average FPS over all the benchmarks, the G1 Gaming RX470's average FPS when we add all those benchmarks together was 38.2 FPS. The Strix 480, on the other hand, when we add it all together, got an average FPS of 44.1. So about 6 FPS higher average because, you know, those 4K benchmarks brought them quite close together, and obviously had about a 10 FPS gap between them and the 1080p testing. So we add that all together, the cost per frame, it's costing you $13.58 per frame on the Strix here. Whereas the G1 Gaming, because of its lower price, it's only costing you $11.75 per frame. So on that basis, if you're buying purely for which one's the best value for money, then I would go for the G1 Gaming RX470. It's just the better value. But you need to keep in mind that you're going to be taking about a 10 FPS loss in terms of frames at 1080p, which is going to be most likely what you're going to be playing at. But yeah, from a purely value for money standpoint, definitely go for the RX470. It's also, this G1 Gaming is also quite quiet also, but it does run quite hot, so that's something you need to keep in mind. I mean, just given the size of this cooler. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't never consider the RX480, especially the Strix. This card, I think, would overclock better. The cooling performance is definitely better. So it'll definitely overclock further. And it definitely has its place for people that don't mind spending a bit extra money. They realize, you know, you're not going to be getting as good value for money. However, they just want the extra frames, they want the extra cooling performance, and they just want an absolutely badass graphics card. Then, yeah, the RX480 is still an excellent GPU, and it's going to give you plenty performance for the money you are spending. Now, I thank you all for watching this video. Please subscribe to Tech Showdown if you haven't already, and like the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.